All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison, and this is Code and Coffee, the show, the stream. I don't know what we call these things. The stream. We'll call it a stream. The stream where I go in. I write code, I build things, and we basically just sort of explore and see what works and see what doesn't work and just generally have fun. Now, I will say hi to chat in just a minute, but anybody who's tuned in before knows I like to do just a real quick intro just to sort of set the stage here, that what you're going to see is me building something for real here, that this is, none of this is canned demos, that this really is the developer experience. And the main reason that I do that is because this is what we as developers wind up doing. And so you are going to notice that I'll make mistakes. You are going to notice that I'm going to look up docs. You are going to notice that there'll be some debugging and things like that, that I am not an expert in React. I do know TypeScript very well. I don't know that I would necessarily say that I'm an expert in TypeScript, but I do know TypeScript really well. And so this is really just about getting in and exploring and just sort of seeing, hey, what can we do with these different technologies? That's what this show is all about, or this stream is all about. The other big thing is, it's all about you as well in chat, so that if you have questions, if you have comments as we go through all of this, then please, please, please do ask questions. Let me know, put that into chat, that this is really what this is all about, is me being able to interact with all of you fine folks. So if you have questions or otherwise, please, please, please do ask, and I will do my absolute best to answer everything that comes through. So with that, let me go ahead and say hello to everybody. It's good morning for me out here in cloudy Seattle. I mean, it's February, so it's just like, it's always cloudy out here. Why is my camera not focusing today? Come on. Focus on the hand, and then there we go. That looks a little bit better. Okay, hopefully it will stay like that. If not, I'll go in and fix it. But in the meantime, good morning to Artyom, good morning to Kevin, good morning to Alpaca. Has anybody done this before? I have. There's a few other people here as well. Welcome to your first time here. Good morning to Lewis. Good morning to Amalek. Good morning to Alina. Good morning to Mallory, of course. Mallory works with me, and she'll be helping out a bit in the chat. She's really the person that makes all of this magic happen. So yeah, good morning to Sophie. Good morning to Excel. Good morning to Kemi. Good morning to Sasha. Sorry, Sashi, and I'm a Christopher, not a Chris. Good morning to Andre. And let's see. Good morning to Stephanie. Good morning to Shaquille, and to Paul, to Kevin, to Andrew. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Cool. Okay. Let's go ahead and let's do a couple of real quick things here. So there was a question from Albakiana who asked, do we have to have the React tools installed? And so let me talk about that real quick, and that will also sort of give us an opportunity to chat a little bit about kind of how all of this works. So do you need to have the tools installed? Absolutely not. So what you're going to notice is that I'll be doing live demos, but the goal here is not necessarily to try and walk everybody through what it is that I'm doing. That you're absolutely welcome to follow along. I threw the GitHub URL into chat. So you can go ahead and clone that and do an npm install and get all of that set up if you so desire. So you can absolutely go check that out. But my goal here is not to try and get everybody to follow along with what we're doing here, because I've tried that in the past, and it honestly just doesn't work, because trying to debug somebody's problems in this type of a style just doesn't work real well. So as a result, this is all going to be demo, but all of the source code is right there inside of GitHub, and you can go ahead and grab that, pull that down, and follow along if you like. So yeah, Sashi, no worries at all about that. That happens all the time. Good morning to Zuri. Good morning to Mike. Cool. All right. Let's see here. I'm just sort of adjusting a couple of things here. Okay. Let's go ahead and get on into it. Cool. All right. So that is, again, my GitHub repository, which I shared out in chat. You can go ahead and grab that. And what you are going to notice right down below me is the goals for today. So what we've done here, let me actually start it so we can see the current state here. npm run start. Yeah, I'm tweaking a little bit with my volume there, Sashi. My microphone moved a little bit, and so my volume was spiking a little bit too high there, and so I'm just trying to find the right level. So I apologize for that. In any event, here is our site. So this is where things currently sit. Right now, what we're doing is we're displaying one recipe out through React. And when we left off our stream last week, what we did was we set up a little bit of state. So our one recipe right now is inside of state. And right now, if you click on each of these individual items, they will then toggle whether or not they're completed. And so you can go ahead and see all of those and how that's currently working. So that's where our application sits. Now, right now, what is making this happen here is it's all being done through just some hard-coded JavaScript. So there is our one recipe that's sitting there, and obviously this is not the yeah, you have to refresh the page there. No worries. But anyway, so this is obviously not the best way for us to create our application. That we don't want to hard code in, hey, this is what we've got. We want an API. And so that's what I want to start adding in this morning, is I want to add in an API. So I'm going to start by basically just taking what I've got right there, shifting that out into an API, talking about how we get that set up with Azure Functions and with Azure Static Web Apps. We'll see how to go ahead and deploy that out, and that will be sort of stage one or step one. And then stage two, step two will be to see how we can do this through a database. So I want to add in Cosmos and see how we can do this with a database. So that's the goals of the stream. We'll see how far we actually wind up getting. But that's my goal, is to get an API set up and to get our database set up as well. So that way it's not just hard coded into there. So that's where we're going there. Okay. Jose asked the question, what's my strongest skill technically? Probably TypeScript, just as far as like a language goes, with Python probably coming in as a close second. I've spent so much time on those two languages. That's probably the strongest as far as language goes. As far as frameworks, on the server side, probably these days Django. I've done so much work in Django. I'm such a huge fan of Django. I really do want to get a Code and Coffee done where we spend a lot of time in Django. I did that a little bit last year, but I really want to go back and take a bigger look at Django and get more into it. I'm such a huge fan of Django. Beyond that, probably a little bit of Azure Functions, sort of like Express and things like that. But yeah, so sort of a jack of all trades beyond that on the server side. And then as far as client-side frameworks go, I probably know Vue the best, although I am getting a much larger handle on React. Certainly going through streams like this helps me out in that space. So yeah. Okay, Sasha, yes, do we need anything set up other than VS Code for today's goals? Again, if you want to follow along, you could also, you'll also want to check out Azure Static Web Apps, which is where we're going to be deploying everything out to. There you go. And you can go ahead and check that out. Right there. Django plus React equals perfection. You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, Jose, and I need to spend a little bit more time combining Django with a client-side framework. That usually when I'm using Django, what I'm doing is all server-side rendering. I do so little with using Django as a REST API that when I think REST API, my brain just immediately goes to Flask, just because Flask is lighter weight and just sort of like gets out of my way a little bit more. And so I never really use Django with front-end frameworks. I know that it's a really popular solution. It's just one I haven't spent a lot of time with. Maybe I'm not going to do that today because trying to get Django set up takes a fair bit, but maybe that's something that we could do on a future series, is spend a little bit of time with Django and then take a look at how we could add a front-end framework into that. I really like that idea. Maybe we can do that in the future. I dig that. So yeah. So as already mentioned, did a to-do list. Struggling to cross out items. Yeah. So here's how I did it. The way that I set up my my crossing out of items is you'll notice that each item in the list has a Boolean flag here for completed, and so just true false, obviously, for whether or not it's completed. And if I take a look inside of my my recipe component, which is what's handling the display, my class name is going to be toggled based on whether or not the item is completed. So you'll notice that I've got my line through there, and so we're just toggling that based on whether or not it's completed. What's handling the toggle is I have an event handler right here. That's wired up so that every time you click on an item, it's executing that event handler. And that event handler is actually sitting back out here on my toggle step completion. So what you're going to notice is that we look for the particular item. We then copy out the recipe. We then find the particular item and toggle the completed, and then we save that back. And because of the magic of state, what will then happen is that will then flip the toggled bit, it'll get reevaluated, and then it will change that appropriately. So now all of that behaves as we would expect, just like that. Cool. Shaquille asked the question, how do you run the app? What you'll want to do is npm install, and then npm run start, and you could do that. George asked the question, do I have resources to learn about React and Angular? So Mallory put in the link to React, which is honestly where I would have pointed you to start as well. So that's a perfect location. I am going to tease that in the not too distant future, probably within the next 3 weeks, we are going to have a full React course over on Microsoft Learn. Docs.microsoft Learn. So you can keep an eye out there as well. That's coming in the future, so you can see that. And then you can also go back and check the prior Web Wednesday videos that prior to this week, we actually spent a fair bit of time going through React, getting this set up and so forth. So you can also go check those out. As far as Angular, you could go check out the Angular website and go from there. I don't have anything on Angular yet. It's been a long time since I've done Angular, so I don't have any great recommendations for Angular outside of just pointing to the docs from there. So cool. All right. I love the questions, by the way. So please, please, please ask questions. That, again, that's what we're here for. That is what we are here for. Okay, cool. Quick sip of coffee. Thank you, Mallory, for throwing in all of those links. Let's get a couple of thank yous in there for Mallory, doing fantastic work there. So, you have experience in creating a sample React.js application, need to learn about it? Yeah, so definitely go check out the prior video series that Mallory just linked out to. And again, keep an eye out on Microsoft Learn, and also keep an eye out on my Twitter handle. Yeah, keep an eye out on my Twitter handle, because once our React course releases, I will absolutely be tweeting that out. So you can also keep an eye on my Twitter handle from there. So cool. All right, let's see here. All right, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? Okay. Let me take a real quick step back here. Let me talk a little bit about Azure Static Web Apps, because this is going to drive where we're going with all of this. So our primary goal for today is to set up an API, server-side API. And so if we're going to set up a server-side API, we need somewhere for that code to run. And there's a lot of different ways that we could do this. That one way that we could do this, we could set up something like Django. We could set up something like Express. We could set up something like Restify. And we could create then a full-blown API, and then away we go from there. And all of that would work just fine. But the catch with doing something like that is it then requires setting up some form of server, and it then requires worrying about things like scaling and so forth. And that just gets tedious. That just, it diverts my attention away from what I really want to be doing, which is just writing code. And so this is where serverless comes into play. That with serverless, what I do is I write my code. And then I push this out to the cloud, and then the cloud just manages everything for me. And every cloud provider has some form of serverless. The Azure form of this is done through Azure Functions. Now, our hosting right now is being done through this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful little service called Azure App Services, or Azure Static Web Apps, Azure Static Web Apps, which in my opinion is the best thing that we've released since VS Code. I'm such a huge fan of this service. And it's what we've been using to host out our little application publicly. So if I go take a look here, my React recipes, let me just browse out to it. Yeah, we can actually see that right here. This is as it sits out there in the wild, being publicly hosted out. All of that's being done through Azure Static Web Apps. So Azure Static Web Apps will give us our static serving for front-end content, so all of our HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which you can see right there on the page. And we also have the API portion as well, and that's going to be what we'll spend our time on today, is setting up that API. And you'll notice that that's going to be done through Azure Functions. And so Azure Functions is going to be the serverless implementation, and we're going to see how to set this up. Now, unfortunately, there's going to be a couple of moving parts here that we'll have to go in and configure. It's not quite as seamless as it's going to be. That one big thing to highlight here is the fact that this is still a preview service. So you are going to notice that we'll have to string together a couple of things to make the magic happen locally. But over on the server, it's actually going to be rather seamless. So it'll be very nice on the server. The local dev experience is still coming along, but it's not going to be complex. It's just going to be that there'll be a couple of things that we'll have to string together. It's not a huge thing. So yeah. I'm gonna ask the question. So after one finishes learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, is it best to get familiar with React and TypeScript? Okay. The way that I'm going to answer this, and I'm going to just spend like a minute on this here, because I think it's an important question. So after you learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript, what's the next step? And the next step is learn a framework. Now, I'm not going to get into a large debate over what framework it is that you should go learn. Should it be Angular? Should it be React? Should it be Vue? Should it be Svelte? That's all up to you. That all of those frameworks have some level of popularity. Some are growing, some are shrinking, and so forth. I don't think that there's necessarily any downside to deciding, hey, this is going to be the one that I'm going to invest in and go that route. Partly because, again, you're going to find shops that use Vue and you're going to find shops that use Svelte. So, I mean, you're always going to be able to find shops that are using all of those different frameworks. But the other thing is this, is you are going to notice that all of those frameworks share an awful lot in common, that they all have some level of this is how we're going to manage state, and they're all going to have some level of this is how we create components, and some level of this is how we do routing, and things like that. Like, they all do the same thing. They all just do it in different ways. They all have different approaches to it. And so by learning one, what you're going to pick up is a lot of those core skills, which is then going to make it easier for you to go learn the next one and the next one and the next one. That, for want of a better analogy here, that when you learn a second language, it makes it easier then to learn the third, and it makes it easier then to learn the fourth. And the same thing holds true here, that once you learn one of those frameworks, then it's going to make it easier to learn the next one and the next one. So pick a framework that you like, pick one that you feel is approachable, go through that, and then, start to decide what it is that you want to go there. Now, my own personal thought is I really like Vue, that I think Vue is relatively approachable, especially as compared to some of the other frameworks that are out there. I think Vue is a great place to start. But again, completely up to you on that. As far as learning TypeScript, I'm a huge fan of TypeScript. I definitely would recommend taking a look at TypeScript, especially because, like, if you decide, hey, I'm going to do Angular, if you're going to do React, that there's a lot of TypeScript that goes into that. And TypeScript is just, it's becoming more popular, and it really helps smooth out some of the rough edges that JavaScript brings. I'm a huge fan of TypeScript. Okay, cool. Glad to see, George, that you're a fan of VS Code. VS Code. I made the switch to VS Code as my full-time editor maybe about 4 years ago now, and I haven't looked back. I think in that last 4 years, I've opened up Visual Studio maybe about 3 times, 4 times, and on my two current systems, so my desktop and my laptop, which is sitting back there, I don't even have Visual Studio installed. That I do everything through VS Code. Now, admittedly, I don't do a lot of work these days with C#. So I don't do a lot of Windows development and things that Visual Studio can really help you out with. But with all my web dev and doing like Python and TypeScript and so forth, VS Code is such a fantastic platform. So yeah. Okay. And, speaking of VS Code here, sort of a perfect segue, Azure Functions. Oh, you're very welcome, Callie. Callie says wanting to learn more about Azure, so glad you're covering it. Thank you. That's fantastic. Okay. So, Matthew says, great and simple, thank you. No React well, but Vue is interesting. Yeah, go check out Vue. And in fact, I did a full app on Vue in the past. So you can go check out the prior Code and Coffee. Again, keep an eye out on docs.microsoft.learn, docs.microsoft.com/learn, where you'll find a Vue course that will be coming out very soon. So if you're looking for more info on Vue, you can definitely check that out as well. Okay. So back over here on Visual Studio Code, what I did is I clicked on extensions. Give me 2 seconds here. Let me yoink, yoink, yoink. I want to go grab, zoom it here real quick so I can just draw my screen. Boop-doo. Run. Okay. There we go. So I clicked on the extensions tab here, and this is probably my favorite thing about VS Code is it's lightweight, but yet it's extensible. So you can add in the different things that you want. So if you click on that little extensions, do a search for Azure Functions, you'll notice that you can then get the Azure Functions extension. And so we'll be using that Azure Functions extension to then start creating our Azure Functions. So let me choose my Azure extension bar. I've got a bunch of the Azure extensions installed here. Let me go into my functions, and you'll notice that on my functions right here that I've got the option to create a function. I've also got the option to create a brand new project. And so this is what I'm going to want for right now is to create a brand new project. So I'm going to click on Create Project. It's going to ask me for the folder that I want here. And it dawns on me I need to create a folder here real quick. So let me just do that. Boink. And I'm going to call that API. It's hidden behind there. There, you can sort of see it right there. So that's where I'm going to, that's what I'm going to use. So let me go browse and let me choose that API folder. Okay, so that's where I want to create it all. It asks me about the language that I want to use. So I can use JavaScript, TypeScript, C#, and Python if I'm using Azure Static Web Apps. Java and PowerShell, as of right now, are not supported for functions for Azure Static Web Apps. So I'm going to choose TypeScript. And then it's going to ask me for a template for my first function. And one of the things that you're going to notice about Azure Functions is that you can actually get them to execute in response to a whole bunch of things that happen inside of Azure or even outside of Azure, that you can set up different hooks and so forth to be able to capture a lot of different requests that are going on. HTTP trigger is the one that we're interested though, which is going to make this a callable API, which is kind of what we typically think of when we're thinking about an endpoint API. So I'm going to choose HTTP trigger. It's going to ask for a name, and I'm going to call this recipe. Yep, let's call it recipe. My authorization level, not going to worry about this for right now. I'm just going to leave that as anonymous. Just going to leave that, and then it will go ahead and create my project here, and I'll take a look at what we've got in just a moment. I want to get in and take a look at a couple of quick questions from chat here. So Mohammed says, you're enjoying the session. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. George says, can we build cross-platform applications using single React code? Is that so? Yes. So there's a couple of different things that you can do with React. So there is a thing called React Native, which allows you to create like mobile browser apps and things like that with it. So you can go that route. But one other big thing that you can do is, and this is actually done regardless of the type of framework that you're using. So it's not just React that allows you to do this. Is, let's see, where does GitHub have it? It doesn't. Okay. Can't think of a site off the top of my head. Anyway, one of the things that you can do is you can set up what's known as a progressive web app, which can actually be done regardless of the type of application or type of framework that you're using. And with a progressive web app, it basically then acts an awful lot like an installed app. And so that can give you sort of that native style without necessarily rewriting everything. So yeah, so you can do all of that. Okay. Sashi says it has to overwrite get ignore function JSON. Yeah, you can go ahead and just say yes on that. But again, I'm not going to focus in on trying to walk everybody through what it is that I'm doing. So I do want to make sure that I highlight that. Okay, so let's take a real quick look here. So what you're going to notice is this is the boilerplate code that was created by my Azure function. And you're going to notice that I've got my import statement here that's going to pull in my Azure function, it's going to pull in my context, and it's going to pull in my HTTP request, more on those objects in a second here, and then Azure Functions. Now, the thing about my Azure Functions and why this is giving me red squigglies, and that is in fact the technical term, is it does require an NPM library. So this does use an NPM library. And in fact, you'll notice that right here, there's a little package.json that's been created. And you're going to notice that we've got our Azure Functions listed right there. And then we've also got our TypeScript listed right there. So I do need to install those. So let me go ahead and open up a new terminal window here. Let me change directories into API, and let's do an npm install. Chugga. That's now installed. And so now my red squigglies go away. So I've now installed that library. Now the rest from here is this sample function, and we're going to eventually completely replace this with our own code. But what you'll notice is we're going to create a brand new HTTP trigger. So this is now going to be our function here. So you could, rename this maybe as, let's say, recipe function or something like that. Let's make sure that I do that down below. There we go. Give it a little bit of a better name, so recipe function. Then you're going to notice we're going to create this again as an Azure function. And this little syntax here, this is TypeScript in action. That what that is doing is that's identifying that recipe function is going to be of type Azure function. And that's going to help enable IntelliSense and help ensure that my code is going to be built appropriately. So it's a fantastic little thing here, being able to set up my type hints like that. Then we're going to have our async function here. So we're just creating a normal TypeScript function. We're going to have two parameters here, our context and our request. Now, the request is a shortcut parameter here that just gives us access to the request that the user made. So an Azure function is just like any normal server-side API. So we're going to have a request, that's whatever it is that the user sent up, and we're going to have a response, whatever it is that we're going to send down to the user. So we have a shortcut right there to the request object. So we can, read the query string, we can read the body, everything else that might be on that. So that's that part there. And then right here, you're going to notice the context. And so our context actually gives us more information. It's going to give us access to the request, but it's also going to give us access to the response. It's going to give us access to the environment that this is running in and so forth. So the context is really the core object that we're going to be most interested in here, because this is how we're going to communicate with the outside world. Now you'll notice that with context, we do have the ability to write out to a log, and we could read that log later on if we added in a little thing called App Insights and go from there. We've got just a very basic little message like this. And then what you're going to notice is we've got our name here, so const name, that we're just going to read out from either the query string or from the body. And that's just, again, a little bit of boilerplate code here. And then we build up a message. So we're going to look to see whether or not we got a name. If we did get a name, then we'll print out sort of that generic hello world. If we didn't get a name, then we're just going to say, hey, you know, it executed successfully, but we just didn't get a name. And then we build up the response here. Now, if we break this down into what we're going to be interested in, the two big things that we're really interested in when we start writing our own code is going to be this res object off of context. Again, that's going to be our response. That's how we're going to send down to the user. And then what you'll also notice is on our request, again, that's how we're going to read information in. So anything that we might have on the query string or anything that we might have on the body, we can go ahead and read that in. And a little bit later, we'll also see how we can start to set up a little bit of routing here and start to read information from the path and use that, which will be really nice. Okay. So let's leave this the way that it is, and I'm going to launch this locally here in just a moment. Aspera says, any chance for lighting you can't see? I'm not sure what lighting it is that you're referring to. If you help me out a little bit more, I can see what I can do. Okay. Now, let me go back to this package.json file. This package.json file, this was created. All this is inside of my API folder here. All of this was created by my creating my Azure function. And so inside of this package.json, what you're going to notice right here is that there's a set of scripts that it has to now run our application. And you'll notice that there's a little start command that we've got right here that we can go ahead and run that. So we're going to run this locally, much in the exact same way that we would run any node project. That with any node project, typically the way that you start it is by saying npm start or npm run start. And it's going to be the exact same thing here, that I'll go npm run start. So let me do that, npm run start, hit enter, and let that do its thing. And you'll notice it's going to set up my little URL. Let me click on that to open that up inside of my browser, which it put over here. And so now you're going to notice that we get that little message that we expected. So it's telling us this HTTP triggered function executed successfully, pass a name into the query string, a request body for a personalized response. So I can go in and say question mark name equals Christopher, hit enter, and now you'll notice that it says hello Christopher. This is very much just like setting up a normal endpoint, that we've got our little query string, we've got our little bit of code that's going to read that and send it back out. Admittedly, it's a little bit different of a setup if you've done something like Express, that you're going to notice that I don't have like a post or anything like that set up here. But it's still pretty much the same basic concept, that I'm going to read in some data, I'm going to do something with it, and I'm going to send a response down. Okay, let's keep building on this. Let's go ahead and set this up to return out a simple recipe here, or a sample recipe. So I'm going to go over to my app.tsx, and I'm going to go grab my recipe here. So let me just copy that. And let's go back over here to my trigger. And let's go ahead and const recipe equals, and let's just put this in right here. Okay. Now I could go in and set a type on this, which I'm going to come back to later. But this is our recipe. So all I did was just copy and paste it. So it's just a JSON object. We aren't going to read anything from the query string for right now. So I'm just going to get rid of all of that. And now what I want to do is I want to return back this recipe. And normally the way that we would return something back is just by putting it inside of the body. And I want this to be a full JSON object. So I'm going to go ahead and build this out as a JSON object. And I'm going to say, actually, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to return back the JSON object. We'll just say body recipe, and we'll just leave it like that. Cool. So there is now our JSON. If you've done this before, though, if you've worked with a server endpoint before, you know that we can't just send JSON and just expect it to work. Because by default, we're sending text. So we do need to make sure that we're setting our content type. So fortunately, this response object is a full JSON object that you'll notice right here that we've got our status 200. And you'll also notice that I could then go in and say content type, and then set this to application JSON. And so now that's going to flag this as, hey, we're going to be sending down JSON. So let me go ahead and save that. Are you updating? You're not. Okay. Let me npm run watch. You're not going to do what I want you to do. Fine. I'll do an npm just start on that. Let me see. Yeah, okay. I think that there's a way that I could update this to have it watch for changes. I'm not going to worry about it for right now. I don't want to rabbit hole in on that. I'll leave it like it is. It's fine. It's fine. All right. In any event. Okay. So we've now updated this so that it's going to return back a JSON object. So let me come back over here and let's go ahead and just hit enter. And now you're going to notice that this is now set up to use a JSON object. Cool. So what we've done here is we have now set up a very basic little endpoint here that's going to return back a JSON object. Okay. With this setup, Shakilius can't use NodeMon. I wish. That would make my life easier. Azure Functions does not use Node the same way as like Express does. So NodeMon will work just fine with something like Express. With Azure Functions, there's a little bit more that's happening behind the scenes to make it all happen. And so unfortunately, I'm not able to just use NodeMon. That what I would need to do is I would need to string together some sort of a watch on TSC. And then every time that it changes, have it restart then on that func start. I think there might be like a watch command on this, but again, I'd have to stop and dig to figure out where that is. And I just don't want to rabbit hole on that right now. So yeah, I know that there's a way to do it, but I just don't remember what it is off the top of my head. And again, I don't want to dig too deep into that. Using NodeMon would be much easier. I agree completely. Okay. Let's see. So there's our endpoint. Now what I want to do, let me go into my app TSX is now I want to read in from that endpoint. And I could hard code that right into here, but I don't want to. That's not really a great way for me to go in and do that. That what I really want is I want a store object here. So I'm going to say store.ts, and let's go ahead and create this. So now I'm going to say export const load recipe and oops. If I can write this out correctly. Okay, so there's going to be my load recipe. Let me make sure that I mark this as async because I know I'm going to want an await eventually here. And let me say await fetch, and let's say API recipe. Const, actually I can just do this, equals await response JSON, and then let's return back my recipe. Cool, and you know what else I could do is I can even do this. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, cool. All right, so here's what I did is I built out a little helper function that's going to be inside of my store. And you're going to notice that I've got export const load recipe. So this is now going to be my function. I've set this up as asynchronous, which if you're not familiar with Async Await, this is I think, a better way to manage promises than doing then. With async, now what I can do is just say await, which basically just says, this is going to take it a second. Wait till this is done, grab the response, and then just lather, rinse, repeat all the way down. So it will do that, and it will do that. So now I'm going to await the response from my API. I'm going to await the response from my from the conversion into JSON, and then I return that back. So this is now going to be my store. Let me now use my store here. So let me just say import store, and then I think I can never remember this syntax. There we go. That's what I want. Okay. So Matthew says, scripts dev, nodemon, dist index, JS watch should allow us to run nodemon. Again, with Azure Functions, I'm not entirely certain on that. You can give it a shot, but I don't think that that's going to work with Azure Functions because Azure Functions itself needs a different runtime, and my index.js isn't going to contain the entire runtime there. So that's going to wind up being the challenge. Learning Spent, awesome series. Well, thank you. Can't remember what week we're on. Neither can I. In a pandemic world, what is time? I'm trying to remember now. I think that this is week 4. I don't know. Let's just call it week 4. I think that's okay. All right. Anyway, I'm lucky I remember what day of the week it is. I have this thing just like in normal times where I'm terrible with dates. So I will always like say the wrong date, or I will say tomorrow when I mean 2 days from now, and things like that. Like it's one of those things about the way that my brain operates. I'm terrible with dates. And my lovely wife Karen, we've been married for many years now, will just like inline conversation just correct me, so that I will say tomorrow, and she'll say, oh, you mean Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday. And we'll just keep on going from there. So, I mean, without her, I wouldn't know where I was anyway, but definitely when it comes to dates, again, even a normal time, I'm terrible with it. And in a pandemic world, I'm completely lost. I never know what day of the week it is because they all just run together now. Anyway. let's get back over here. All right. So let me set up my my app here, and I'm curious. I should be able to just go async on my app. Whoops. Let's put this into the right place. Async, and then let me go ahead and do this. I'm going to now replace that with await store.load recipe. Okay, cool. Think this is episode 1314? Yeah, I think that's about right for like total. I'm trying to think for React though, what week this is. I think it's 4. We'll go with 4. Mallory, if you happen to know, that'd be fantastic. Okay. Anyway, so let's go ahead and load up our recipe here. And now, in theory, all of this should work. Now, you're going to notice I said in theory. And the reason that I said in theory is because in reality, this actually isn't going to work. And in fact, this sort of goes back to the conversation that we were having about NodeMon and about trying to get this to launch and so forth. So one of the little things that you do need to keep in mind with Azure Functions, let's not hit the microphone again. One of the things that you need to keep in mind with Azure Functions is the fact that Azure Functions does require a special runtime. So it does not need to, or it can't just simply be, I'm going to launch my index.js and away it goes. Like it needs a runtime to run inside of. And you'll notice, that's running then on a different process on a different port for dev purposes. When I go to publish this, it's all going to be in the same location. Dev, different process, different port. Production, it's going to be in the same process. So what that means for dev purposes here is that I need to set up a proxy here, that I need to tell it, hey, when we look for whack API, whack recipe, that what we're really trying to do, again, for dev purposes, is to forward it over to here. So that's the little update that I am going to need to make here. And I'm going to make this to Snowpack. And if you're new here, this is your first if this is your first video for the React series or anything like that, I'm using this fantastic little tool called Snowpack, which is an auto bundler. So rather than me having to set up Webpack and write code to create my code, instead, I can use this wonderful tool called Snowpack. And Snowpack is actually hosting my local application. And I do have the ability to set up a proxy. So I can tell it that if I'm looking for, and they give you an example of whack API, whack users, and I need to reroute that to somewhere else, that I can go in and do that. So let me see here. Where is... It's inside my Snowpack config file. See if I can't find this real quick. Mallory confirms it is week 4. Fantastic. See, I was right. That's good to know. Alrighty. Let's see the dev server. All right. I can't find the doc real quick. I'm going to see if I can't do this off the top of my head with memory. I give myself about a 30% chance of succeeding here. But I think what it is I think I just want proxy. And I think what I want is I want API, and I want this to go to localhost 7071 API. I think that is right. So my Snowpack config is what you use to configure how Snowpack runs locally. And I think that is right. It's not right. Something is failing. Oh, it's giving me a 404. Oh, okay, that's fine. Let's see. Can I remember how to do this off the top of my head? Oh, proxy is deprecated in favor of routes. Okay. Routes. Routes.map. Okay. All right. So I guess I did have the doc right. Okay, let's go ahead and then I guess just copy this. Let's paste this in. You want to learn more about Snowpack? Is it an alternative to Create React app? Matthew asks. Yes, is sort of the short answer to that. The slightly longer answer is what Create React app does for you is it will set up a basic template, and then it will also set up Webpack automatically for you. So when you say like React serve, I think is the command that you use or something like that. What it's doing is it's actually just running Webpack behind the scenes. So Snowpack is an alternative to that. And it just will serve that up automatically for you. Okay. Let's see if I can't get this to work here. All right. So let's go ahead and let's move that up here. There's my mount. Okay. And then now let's see. I don't want to create a new server. I don't need that. Or do I? I do. Okay. 7071. Time is a flat circle. Oh gosh, what was it? It's going to come to me later. It's not a flat circle. It's a something Bellamy. For anybody who saw The Good Place. And it like loops around in cursive and then comes back to the beginning again. It'll come to me later. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. In any event. All right. So many modern front like to use an API. This usually separate. So maybe something like that. And no special configuration is needed to talk with it. Okay. That's exactly what I want. Here's what I want. Sync applications. They updated this in Snowpack, so I'm like literally learning this on the fly here. Okay, that's not what I want. An API path. This is what I want. So, okay. Yeah, this is exactly what I want. Right. Okay, so we'll proxy all API requests to another server that's running locally on 3001. Okay, that's exactly what I want. So instead of 3001, it's going to be to 7071. So what I want is anything that's going to API, I want it to just go to API, but on the other server. So I don't want to remove it. I want to leave it like that. Okay. Let's see. Nope. Cannot find module HTTP proxy. All right, I can fix that. Let's npm install save dev HTTP proxy. There we go. All right, now let's try to run this again. All right. Jeremy Bierme. Thank you, James. That's what I was looking for. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. Which, by the way, your show recommendation for today, if you haven't gone through it already, is The Good Place. I will openly admit, sort of like, sort of like a handful of other shows. Good Place was a bit of a slow burn for me, that it took probably about 4 or 5 episodes until I got into it. And then once I was hooked, it was fantastic. So yeah, it's such a wonderful show. And what's also great about it is it's you know, sort of deep, it's sort of meaningful, it's a little bit like pop culture, but it's also just like a light watch, which I think is great in today's world. Okay, let's see. Objects are not valid as as a React child. Oh, okay. Let's see here. Okay, let's see if we can't figure out what's going on. Okay. So I told you we're really cooking here. So I'm really trying to put this all together like on the fly. And I think what it is I don't think that this is actually going async. Let me do this real quick. Let me console log. Let's do it the old-fashioned way. Mashed potatoes recipe. And then let's save that. And let's see now, what is this giving us? Let me just do a refresh. Interesting. Okay. So it seems to be loading correctly. All right. That's a good sign. So it's loading correctly. I do have a to-do still there, but that's all right. So it's loading correctly. Objects are not valid as a React child. Found object promise, but it shouldn't be a promise because it's my load recipe. Good to see a little bit of love for the good place in chat. That's always nice. Interesting. All right. So it's loading the object, but it's telling me here objects are not valid React child found object promise. Let me try this. Let me just try making a copy of it. Will that work? When in doubt, just make a copy. No. All right. It's definitely loading. Yeah, I can definitely see it loading there. All right. Let me just try and call it without the await. I don't think that that's going to work, but let me try it that way. Nope. Yeah, see, promise pending. All right, see? Await and async. All right. I am stumped. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, none of that is going to give me what I want. That's interesting. So what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to like offload this real quick. I'm just trying to, and this is something you can do quite frequently in JavaScript, just like outlevel your async await one level. And sometimes that works. And it still is a promise. All right. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do it like we would actually do it. Let's go to Stack Overflow. Okay, so I need to do this. Trying to figure out. So apparently I'm not the only one that's ever had this problem. Oh. Do I need that silly little thing? Nope, that's not it. Jump to the solution. That's not my solution, though. There we go. All right. I really don't know how to solve this. I don't know if anybody else who's in chat has done Async Await with React. Correctly handling Async Await with components. Okay. You know, George, I see that you're throwing in links. Unfortunately, YouTube clobbers them. So unfortunately, I'm not able to see them, which is a little bit disappointing. Okay. What's the exact issue that's happening, Ash Shaquille? So what's happening is I'm trying to load up a value here by using async await. And unfortunately, it's failing because it isn't properly resolving the the promise that you'll notice right here. It's saying object promise, and it's failing out right there. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. And what's annoying is it will print out the object correctly, so I can like load it, but there's still something with async await that winds up just causing things to not behave the way that I had hoped. Okay. Let me grab this and just see something. If the returned object is not a React child, is it possible to cast the response to a React child, says Paul. In theory, yes, but the catch is that React doesn't actually do conversions, that any type casting that you see, or sorry, not React, TypeScript. TypeScript doesn't actually do any conversion. So anything that you see there is actually is syntactical candy. So it doesn't quite behave the way that you would expect. Let me see. Use effect. All right. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and let's do this. Let's set that up with a default. Let's go ahead and see if I can't figure this out. Andrew says, looks like I need to wrap in use effect. Yeah, and that's now what I'm trying to do here, is to do that and see if I can get that to work here. And all right, and Okay, that's fine. And let's go ahead and set recipe. Let's try that first. Nope. Let's see. I have no idea if any of this is going to work here. Yeah, Shaquille says found something on Reddit if it's useful. You know, and you cannot really have an async React component. Async is rendering is experimental. Your async should live inside of useEffect. Yep, and that's where I'm building towards. I'm trying to get it inside of useEffect and get there. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. Is that? Aha, okay. Okay. This is exceedingly annoying. This was not how things were supposed to go today. All right, this is not behaving then the way that I expected. Okay. So there's that. I've got that. Okay. And then I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't know if anybody's still connected at this point. I wouldn't blame you if you're not. This is always the danger of doing something like this is, you know, like I said at the outset of all of this, is that I openly admit I'm not a React expert. And so my goal when I do this is to try and just like explore and play around and bump into things. And typically in the past, when we've bumped into things, we've been able to figure it out in, you know, like 10 or 15 minutes, or at the very least have been able to make appreciable progress towards whatever it was that we were trying to do. And it doesn't look like that's the case at this point. That I really don't know how to fix this. Is anybody still out there? Oh gosh. Sigh. Okay. All right. I really don't know. I'm really sorry, everybody. Usually we can figure this out, and that is definitely not the case today. And yeah. I don't know. I apologize. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Well, I'm completely blocked. Um, okay. Whoa. Hold on. It works. Sort of. It's in an endless loop at the moment, which I need to figure out how to solve. But we're getting closer. It's at least now displaying. Okay. Oops. It works. It's now displaying. My event handler isn't working yet, but that's all right. We're at least now displaying. Is anybody still there? Is it just me at this point? Okay. It is now working. Well, mostly. My click isn't working yet, but that's all right. If anybody's actually still out there, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to just go ahead and close everything down. But if you're still out there, please say hi. Okay. All right. It doesn't look like anybody's still out there. But I got it to work. It works. Mostly. I'm at least closer. Okay. I think everybody's gone. I'm going to go ahead and close everything down. Yeah. Okay. We'll come back next week. We'll keep building on this. I'll do a little bit more research. But in any event, that was Code and Coffee. I apologize for the blow up there, but we did get it to work. So, yeah. All right. Bye.